Well, first of all, I want to thank them so much for coming here and helping us address this important issue. I want to apologize for many people standing in the room. This is a much larger crowd than we expected, but it's a good thing to have this many people interested in Latin American policy. It's a good problem for us to have. So thank you all for joining us. Before we go on to questions, I just want to make sure that we mention to you very quickly that this series will be an ongoing discussion that NDN plans on having. This isn't just we hold a one-month luncheon and then we forget about this issue. We plan on following this up with a summary report on the discussions we're having here and working with the stakeholders and other organizations interested in this so that we can begin to develop and present recommendations to both members of Congress and to the countries of Latin America. So as we engage in the question and answer period, I just want you guys to keep in mind that this will be an ongoing dialogue, and as they say in Vegas, what happens in Vegas, stay in Vegas, will not happen here at this forum. We actually plan on generating a product and pushing it out there for other people to see and use. So with that, are there any questions for our panelists today?
Tony Padilla, representing the Labor Council for Latin American Advancement. I want to first of all thank both of you for this event and the friendship that we're developing here with Mexico. I wanted, especially on the, I want to talk especially on the issue of trade, and I would like to see some language that addresses labor rights in whatever trade that we may do with Mexico. And I'm in particular concerned about this because in previous administration in Mexico, we were invited to come down by our railroad workers down there who at the time they were privatizing the railroad industry. And I went to testify before a committee there. And the members in worked for the railroad lost their railroad retirement. And I just could not imagine that I've been working for the railroad for 42 years, and I could not imagine me losing my pension, you know, in Mexico. I mean, in the government here not coming to the aid. So I want to see more labor rights in Mexico.
Sure. Well, thank you for your comments. Was that a particular question or a comment?
If you have a comment, fine, but it was a statement that I wanted to make.
All I would. Sorry, I completely agree with you. Oh, sorry.
Thank you, Brenda.
I think certainly labor is a critical important issue in how we go about not only with free trade but with fair trade. But you must remember that in many ways NAFTA was a pioneer. And it was a pioneer because it was originally negotiated without labor and environmental clauses in it. And as a result of a Democratic victory in the 1992 elections, the Clinton administration came into office and convinced its Canadian and Mexican partners in the negotiations to negotiate and include as part of the treaty what were then called the side agreements on labor and the environment. So NAFTA is the first modern free trade treaty that included NAFTA and labor provisions. Can we continue to strengthen labor and environmental regulations? Certainly. But I think a lot of that has to be done within the national legal frameworks of each country. I don't think it can be achieved or should be achieved by tinkering with reopening or renegotiating NAFTA.
Yes, question in the back. Question, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Actually, two questions. One with respect to NAFTA. Another little known side of core with respect to NAFTA was the inclusion of the North American Development Plan. Had two windows, an environmental window and a domestic window. It was premised on two notions. One, that free trade produces net wealth, but also produces winners and losers. And the idea of NAFTA was to help the losers become a winner. Do you think there's potential revisiting that particular issue? Secondly, I represent the Hispanic National Mortgage Association. As you know, another saying is when the U.S. economy has a cold, Mexico gets pneumonia. But despite that, the Mexican mortgage market seems to be thriving. In fact, it's recently issued a couple successful mortgage-backed securities in international markets. Do you think the U.S. industry and mortgage market players can learn anything from the Mexican experience?
I think that's for you, Ambassador.
On the NADBank, certainly I think NADBank was one of the byproducts of the supplemental, the side agreements on labor and the environment. The problem with the NADBank is that it has had its mandate so constrained to a regional approach along the border, which has made it very hard to really have a profound impact on preventing social or economic dislocation deeper in the hinterland, either on the American side of the border or on the Mexican side of the border. President Calderon, precisely when he was running when he was running for president, one of the issues that he had as part of his foreign policy agenda, and in particular in regards to the relationship with the United States, was how do we revise NADBank so we can use it as a clearinghouse to channel productive investment, especially in infrastructure, that can allow those communities that have faced displaced labor or have lost jobs to be able to rewire themselves, to be able to continue competing and taking advantages of NAFTA. So the issue of how do we use NADBank in a much more aggressive and intelligent way is still a very prescient issue. On the second one, journalists and, flies and politicians, and in this case diplomats, have one thing in common. We can both get killed by a newspaper. So let me approach this issue of the mortgages in the United States very gingerly. First of all, yes, I have another way of putting it, especially with my Canadian friends, that we live next to an elephant, that it's better to live on top of the elephant than under the elephant, which is our case. Until 2000, the connectivity between the American and Mexican economies was extremely tight. In many ways, the American economy is still the engine that pulls the caboose of the Mexican economy. But one of the interesting things that we have very early on noticed as part of this economic slowdown in America is that there seems to be a greater resilience of the Mexican economy to the effects of economic downturn in the United States. Whether this is because, as part of what I was mentioning, there is a profound social demographic change in Mexico, and the middle classes are expanding, and as such are driving consumption, and consumption is in turn a driver of the economy. And that explains why the mortgages and the housing sector in Mexico is still chugging along very nicely and has not been affected by the downturn here in the United States. I wouldn't have any recipes for you in the United States, but I think that what you have seen in Mexico is the result of macro and micro deregulation, the effect of sustained macroeconomic stability for now 10 years in 3 different administrations: Ernesto Zedillo, PRI, Vicente Fox, PAN, and now Felipe Calderón, PAN, and that this macroeconomic stability, sensible macroeconomic stability, has started to provide the goods. And that as the middle classes expand and as this starts trickling further down, that so far, it seems, the housing industry and the mortgages in Mexico will continue to be a machine. Will this be enough to insulate Mexico if things get worse in the United States, and instead of having a V, you have a U in terms of economic dislocation, slowdown, or potential recession? I don't know. But I certainly think that what happened in 2000, the last time an economic downturn occurred in the United States, where Mexico went from 7% annual growth to 0 in 1 year, has not happened now. We have downgraded our expectations for growth this year, but it's been 0.2, 0.3. So far, so good.
I do hope they learn not to have mortgage products like some of the ones that we have in the subprime markets for their own purposes.
Yes, question over here.
Senator, Mr. Ambassador, there's a troubling trend for state legislatures to be taking it upon themselves to develop laws that are intended to address some of these problems that we have because we haven't been able to figure out the circularity issue with immigration. I'm wondering, some of those things, the most onerous provisions have been stopped by sympathetic attorneys general, governors. I'm wondering what gives you hope looking to the future that we might be able to see some progress here at the federal level so it's not left into the hands of each of the states to be deciding how we proceed.
not only can you be swatted down by a newspaper, but by Lou Dobbs. So, you know, I love you, Lou. You know, anyway, let me just say, you know, this is a troubling issue for us, and one of the things that I will be doing soon is, you know, leading an effort about what is happening in raids across the country where U.S. citizens and U.S. permanent residents are being detained, even after showing their identification. It's outrageous. It's outrageous. And this is an area where the Attorney General of the country should be engaged in a way that is much more robust, because the one thing that we cannot permit is that U.S. citizens and U.S. legal permanent residents are ultimately treated as second-class citizens and individuals. And that is something that we, when I say we, some of us who care about this, and I hope the Congressional Hispanic Caucus, who we're talking to, will engage with us on. So, and in the immediacy, that is part of it. And there are no voices being raised against this. Plenty of voices about how we have to spend more money and break every law to build the fence, but no voices about the violation of rights of U.S. citizens and legal permanent residents. And for all the debate we heard in immigration about treating, from many of my Republican colleagues who referred to those people, after a lifetime of first, I understand what those people means in the context of some vocabulary. And secondly, who talked about there's a difference between how we treat legal immigration and what they describe as illegal immigration. Now you're a U.S. citizen, you get detained. And there are no voices, no voices. Having said that, what gives me cause for some hope? I mean, I think in the short term, we have challenges. For the next 10, 12 months, we have some challenges ahead. And it will be stopping the tide of some of these abuses. There's also a growing economic reality. Crops are beginning to rot in the field. Workers who are needed for both the high-tech industries and things like seafood industries and tourism and whatnot are crying out for help. And when the economic paradigm becomes such that it becomes so incredibly difficult, people's hearts and minds change it. And pressure becomes more widely spread, and therefore political responses come. So I think we see that reality, that underpinning growing. And the question is, how do we deal with that to transfer that in a way that leads us to some greater movement on how we seek some immigration reforms. At the end of the day, lack of federal action will increasingly have states looking for what they believe are solutions. And the question is whether the Attorney General of this country and this administration is going to ensure that what are federal preemptive rights under the Constitution are not ultimately violated by states across the country. And if that is a clear message, then in fact we won't have as bad a set of circumstances as we could face and are beginning to face. If that is not a clear message by the chief law enforcement officer of the country, then we have a challenge on our hands, and it is a difficult one.
Yeah, we're going to take one more question. Go ahead.
Yes, I would like to know your views on the Colombian free trade agreement negotiation. How do you think that these kind of agreements reinforce democratic stability in the region?
Well, those are U.S.-Mexico.
Yeah.
Colombia going to be next in one of the series of discussions? Look, I have been a strong supporter of U.S.-Colombia relationships. We plan Colombia, just about everything that has been necessary in our bilateral relationship to help Colombia achieve its successes as a sovereign democratic country with security and in working with us as it relates to the whole issue of narcotics trafficking. You know, the question is, at this late stage of this Congress, whether or not any trade agreements can move forward. in the highly charged context of the political environment that we are in, with presidential elections, with the whole House of Representatives up for election, with a third of the United States Senate up for election. I don't see the political environment for that. So my prognosis in the short term is not particularly good. In the longer term, I do think that if some elements of the agreement can be worked on, and there may be some much stronger possibilities. But you know, bringing something at a time in which the political atmosphere is just simply, in my mind, that type of well is poisoned, is almost a guarantee for failure. And so I think timing is going to be essential in that possibility.
All I would add as a foreign or third party observing this process is that certainly, and I say this completely convinced, that the most important geopolitical mistake that the United States could do today is not to ratify that treaty with Colombia.
All right, so that was our last question. I do just want to reemphasize that each one of these sessions will focus on a particular country. We will have a session on Colombia. We'll be able to discuss this much further. Today's topic was on Mexico. I believe next month's topic will be on Argentina, but we will get to Colombia. We will get to each of the countries, and I will ask each of our panelists to try and stick to the subject we have so we can actually engage on dialogue on those. Our summary reports will be specific after luncheon on each particular country. So with that, thank you very much, and we'll see you next month.